is a research scholar at New York's Columbia University and author of the book, The Democracy Promotion Paradox, joining us live here on the News Hour from New York. Mr. Trump today is being accused of lying, lying, and lying. What's he doing?
Well, oddly enough, at this point in the campaign, he's going back to his base, which is the most racist, intolerant elements in American society. This birther movement is a racist fantasy concocted by people who simply are not comfortable with an African-American president. Of course Barack Obama was born in the United States. It's strange to even be discussing it. And, you know, Hillary Clinton's comments about Trump is appealing to the worst elements. He's not just appealing. He really is the worst elements. It's also worth noting for me that where are the Republican leaders who want to make their party a decent, respectable, conservative political party? Where's Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, people like that, who have been, admittedly, they're keeping very busy denouncing things Donald Trump has said, but 5 years ago, early in Obama's presidency, those kind of people should have put a stop to this. The Republican Party facilitated this kind of not very subtle racism against Obama, and now it's out in the open with a presidential candidate who simply can't control himself and whom they cannot control.
What was his thinking? What was his logic, or what was the logic of his advisors today? Because at one point he did it was almost like a 30-minute infotainment thing for his hotel chain, and then in about 6 or 7 seconds he said Barack Obama was born in the United States, period. Mr. Obama knew he was born in the United States. He was there at the time. We've all known Barack Obama was born in the United States, and yet he had to put his birth certificate out there to show the world that, oh, it's okay, I wasn't born in Kenya. I mean, how does that happen?
And Trump claimed it as some kind of a victory that happened. How it happened was that a kernel of a bizarre racist fantasy grew and grew in the early days of the Tea Party, when the Republican Party, the more establishment, more mature wing of the Republican Party, was so happy to see some kind of excitement that they let it happen. Now, why Donald Trump decided to do this today is a puzzle for me. Every day that is spent discussing Barack Obama's birth certificate is a good day for Hillary Clinton. And no one understands that better than Hillary Clinton. And if the Clinton campaign is smart, and tactically they've demonstrated that they are, they will try to keep this story alive, because the American people think President Obama was born in the United States. There is a group of people who are solid, loyal Republican voters who don't believe that. They're never voting for Hillary Clinton anyway. Donald Trump this week succeeded in taking what was a bad few days for Hillary Clinton, given her true but poorly worded basket of deplorables comment, given some of the concern about her health after her September 11th, after that day. And he knocked that out of the headlines with his daily putting his foot in his mouth. And he did it again today. Tactically, this is a mistake by Donald Trump.
What's he done to the Republican Party? You've already touched on this idea, but I'd quite like to delve into that a little bit more, because if he does the kind of thing that he was doing today, which is say to his supporters, the press are running late, they're not going to turn up for 30 minutes because they're the voice of dishonesty. He was paying lip service to that anti-reporter, anti-press agenda that his people were, I guess, feeling threatened by a few months ago. Is that coming back again?
Well, this anti-press agenda is a strange one. First of all, the job of a political campaign is to get good media coverage. When a political campaign fails to get good media coverage, it's largely because the campaign isn't functioning very well. And we know that as charismatic for some people as Donald Trump may be, he's a larger-than-life figure, but he's not running a kind of modern presidential campaign. He's running his own, it's his own personal thing. Blaming the media is a natural instinct for a politician, because negative stories hurt. And when you start seeing a lot of them, and when the world doesn't conform to your worldview, when the media doesn't conform to your worldview, it's easy to blame them. But it's not a winning political strategy. It doesn't move voters. If, you know, a voter's going to think, my goodness, if this guy is upset about how, I don't know, CNN is covering him, how is he going to handle being president of the United States? That's a good question. I think both candidates can claim to have gotten poor media coverage. I thought we saw in the presidential forum a couple of weeks ago, the commander-in-chief forum, Hillary Clinton got a much harder, much more difficult set of questions than Donald Trump has. I think the media in the last month or so in the United States has focused so much on the Clinton Foundation, which admittedly I think has done some things questionably, and no attention on the Trump Foundation, which is essentially a slush fund for Donald Trump. That is, you could say the media, I mean, Hillary Clinton can make that argument very well also. But in a campaign, it doesn't help you. It doesn't move voters to say the media is being mean to me.
Gary Johnson, just moving on to another aspect of what's going on with the campaign. Gary Johnson is not going to be taking part in this debate. That's strictly going to be Hillary versus Donald Trump. Is that so much of a surprise? Or to turn that around a little bit, should we be surprised that he didn't really take a hit because he apparently had no idea what Aleppo was?
Well, we don't know, maybe he was about to bump up a few more points in the polls, but what hurt Johnson as much as his Aleppo comment was the fact that the polls tightened. And when the polls tightened, a lot of people who may have been flirting with Donald Trump, or excuse me, flirting with Gary Johnson, realized they had to go back to their candidate. You can cast a protest vote when your candidate is winning or losing by 10 points. But as the race gets close, you can't do that. The Aleppo comment, what it demonstrated for me, and I've actually taken the time and listened to several extensive interviews with Gary Johnson. And if you take the time to do that, something I wouldn't necessarily recommend, he's a very interesting guy with a very interesting personal story. He does not make a compelling argument that he should be president of the United States. This isn't John Anderson in 1980, who was clearly as qualified to be president as either of the other two candidates, or Henry Wallace in 1948, if you want an older history lesson, who had been vice president. This is a guy who has an idea set that I think is very appealing if you're, 19 years old. But he doesn't know a lot about the issues. And it's not just Aleppo. But that's only one of the things he really hasn't demonstrated fluency with. But of course, in this election, you're comparing him to Donald Trump. Of course he knows more about the issues than Donald Trump. But that's a low bar. But Donald Trump is, of course, on the debate stage. What Aleppo demonstrated was that Johnson will have a hard time being anything but a protest vote, growing to an actual person who can draw people who really think he might be president or he could be president. His failure on that Aleppo question shows people, you know what, he's just a protest vote. And the protest vote, remember in America, we don't vote in national elections, we vote in 50 state elections. So what we may see as Election Day approaches is that he will continue to get some votes, and same with Jill Stein, in the states that aren't close, but their support in the states that are close will go down very quickly in the last 2 weeks.
Lincoln Mitchell, good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.